For the last few years, researchers at the site of Pañamarca in the Peña Valley of northwestern Peru have been uncovering colorful Moche wall paintings from over 1,000 years ago. After they record them, they cover them back up. Why? Well, if these ancient murals remain exposed to the elements without a full conservation program, we might lose them forever. We know this because that's pretty much what happened to the first murals that were unearthed there in the 1950s. So at the end of each field season, the researchers of the Archaeological Landscapes of Pañamarca project document, stabilize, and then rebury these paintings. They've been finding amazing artwork, but in 2024, they found something that no one had seen before at the site and in Peru: a throne room for a queen. Hi, I'm Dr. Smiti Nathan, and I'm an archaeologist. In this video, we're going to explore this artifact and how it's changing our understanding of leadership in the ancient Moche world. To understand why this find matters, we need to briefly talk about the Moche and how they function, especially their leadership. Now, when you think of what we might have been traditionally taught about leadership in ancient societies and civilizations, especially empires and states, a single leader might come to mind. This was not the case with the Moche. Instead, scholars think that there were various polities and groups that existed across a 700-kilometer area in what's now modern-day Peru. What brought them together was a shared artistic and architectural tradition that flourished from around 100 to 850 CE. The site of Pañamarca, which sits atop a granite hill, was one of those polities. In fact, it seems to be the southernmost major center in the Moche world. Now, there were people living at the site before it became part of the Moche world, but it truly transformed once it became part of the Moche sphere. The monumental center was rebuilt, and temples and buildings were decorated with what the site is now famous for: its colorful murals. These images are diverse and depict a range of ritual and epic scenes, with subjects ranging from humans to the divine. As far as we know, the Moche didn't have what we would easily recognize as a writing system. So these murals help us understand some of the narratives that they held and created. Now, mural paintings were common throughout ancient Peru and other areas in ancient Central and South America. For example, we find murals at famous Mexican sites Tenochtitlan and Teotihuacan, the Mayan sites of San Bartolo and Calakmul, and the ancient Peruvian sites Huacas de Moche and El Brujo. So the murals at Pañamarca were a known find, but a throne room for a queen has never been found in Pañamarca or in Peru. So let's see what's inside this throne room. The throne room was found inside a pillared hall that the project director Jessica Ortiz Zavalos has named the Hall of the Moche Imaginary. Radiocarbon dating suggests that this hall was built around 650 CE. The walls in this hall are covered with paintings that showcase aspects of Moche ritual and beliefs. In previous field seasons at Pañamarca, researchers had already documented some of the paintings in this hall. They included finely dressed people, warriors with animal features, and battles between a mythic hero and his sea-based enemies. So painted walls here weren't new. What was new was what researchers found when they excavated further into this hall in 2024. They uncovered 4 different painted scenes, all depicting a powerful woman. In one mural, we see a crowned woman holding a scepter. There is a procession of men behind her carrying objects that include textiles and her crown complete with braids. Below this procession is an entire textile workshop of women spinning and weaving, which is actually rare to see depicted in Moche art. As researchers studied the various scenes, they noticed that this particular woman was being depicted again and again. She was strongly associated with the night sky's crescent moon, the sea and its various creatures, and textile arts, including weaving and spinning. But how did the researchers come to the conclusion that this was a throne room for a queen? Well, they found a throne. At the center of the hall sat a painted adobe throne positioned to face directly toward the Pacific Ocean. And guess what was painted inside the interior surfaces of the throne itself? The same woman. Now, you might be wondering, how did they know that this individual was a woman? It's a fair question. And honestly, the way we make sense of sex and gender today might have not been the same worldview that people used in the past. And while we do create categories to make sense of things, scholars are becoming increasingly aware of how our modern views of certain topics like gender can influence our interpretation of the past. When it comes to the Moche, scholars have interpreted gender through artistic visual markers such as clothing, objects associated with individuals, and hairstyles. These markers can be found across artistic mediums that include pottery and murals. In fact, in the 1980s, two scholars proposed that certain figures depicted at Pañamarca were supernatural women. They arrived at the gender part of their conclusion based on hairstyles, specifically two long, spirally bound locks. They mentioned that this hairstyle appeared to be exclusive to women in other artistic depictions where the body was shown nude. Now, it's worth saying that this is the scholar's interpretation of the patterns that they're seeing in the art. Like all interpretations, it has its limitations. For example, it's challenging to really know how an artist or depicted individual would have viewed gender identity. This doesn't discount the framework that the scholars came up with. It's just good to know because it's a framework that's going to be continually reflected upon and refined with further findings, research, and analysis. In fact, when it comes to identifying the role of the Pañamarca individual, the researchers at the site anticipate that people are going to debate whether this woman was a priestess, queen, or even a goddess. But here's why they think she was a queen. The throne's back support shows erosion, and that kind of wear typically comes from repeated use over time. If the throne was meant to be a symbolic placeholder for a goddess, then it doesn't make sense for that type of wear to be there. In addition, researchers recovered greenstone beads, fine threads, and even human hair near the throne, which they believe supports the notion that someone actually sat there. Now, it should be noted that the researchers are unsure if they have enough material from the hair to conduct a full DNA analysis, but they're definitely going to try. Now, could this woman have been a priestess? It's possible. Scholars have previously identified what they considered priestesses in Moche art and have even found burials of women they interpreted to be priestesses. Now, fellow scholars have looked at these priestess interpretations and wondered if these women could in fact have been political leaders. But it's important to note that the line between political leader, religious ruler, and even divine entity might not have been as clear-cut. In fact, in the past, some scholars thought that those polities we mentioned before were ruled by king divinities. Recent scholars have suggested that there could have been queen divinities or leadership without the divine aspect. Whatever the intersection with religious life and the divine might have been, recent research, including the work at Pañamarca, is helping rewrite past narratives that assume that it was mainly men who held power and leadership roles. Now, as this find highlights, there is definitely room for interpretation regarding multiple aspects of this artifact. What I find really compelling about this project is the fact that the researchers decided to share their findings, photographs, and reconstructions of the murals with the broader public shortly after their 2024 field season. Now, typically in archaeology, researchers wait until their peer-reviewed publication comes out to announce their findings. Sometimes this is due to protocols put in place by the country's government a site might be located in, but it's often due to the fact that there's just a lot we have to process and analyze after a field season wraps up. Even after the analysis is done, sometimes we just need some time to sit with the data and formulate our interpretation. But this project decided to do something different. So the team was already doing a significant amount of their documentation and conservation work during the field season in real time. However, they made the decision to share their findings publicly as they were formulating their interpretation and awaiting further analyses, like with the DNA from the hair they had found. This allows others to access the material sooner and potentially come to their own conclusions, even if those conclusions differ from the researchers. Personally, I think this is great for collaboration and public engagement. And as we've seen throughout this video, the artifacts here give us plenty to debate and discuss. While these murals and this artifact get reburied after each field season, the team has shared them with the world, and they're changing the story of who actually led parts of the Moche world. This video is part of our Artifact of the Day series, where we take a quick look at one intriguing object from the past. If you're interested in watching another Artifact of the Day video, check out the video here.